So my 94-year-old dad recently asked me to be his executor. Visions of being my mom's executor came flooding back to me. It was not a good experience for me. It was really stressful, and I was not prepared for all the things that I'd have to do. And honestly, between you and me, I do not think that I could go through that again today. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my experiences as an executor, what made it so difficult for me, and I'm going to share with you how I'm going to decide if I'm willing to go through that again for my dad. And this is going to really help you decide if you should take on the role of executor for your family member. Hi there, I'm Sophia. Welcome to another video. I put out weekly videos to help you be a more satisfied, more successful, and more informed family caregiver. Go ahead and hit subscribe now so you don't miss a thing. Think about it. Being named executor of your family member's estate is really the highest honor that they could give to you. They are saying that they trust you above anyone else in their life to take care of their most intimate affairs as if you were them, to close up all the loose financial ends and make sure that all the creditors are paid and that all the assets get distributed to the beneficiaries. It's a super important role. But in some cases, when you're named executor, your family member is bestowing on you the biggest, most stressful burden that you could possibly experience. I think a lot of people just say yes to this role without really understanding what's involved in it and not really knowing what's to come. By the end of this video, you're going to have a much better idea whether being named executor is a good thing for you or not, because you really do have a choice. First, let me start off with just a few definitions. An executor is someone who is named in another person's will to take care of their estate after that person passes away. Sometimes you'll hear the term executrix, which refers to an executor who is a female, but I don't know, that word reminds me of dominatrix, so I really don't like that term. If a person passes away without a will, that's called intestate. If a person dies in intestacy or doesn't name an executor in their will, then the court is going to assign a person to manage the affairs of the estate and to tie up all those financial loose ends. In that case, the assigned person is called an administrator, not an executor. But essentially, they have the same legal responsibilities and duties. So I'm going to give you a simplified list of my duties as executor for my mom. This was my experience, and in some cases you might have more duties or less duties depending on the complexity of the estate. But generally, these are the things that you're going to have to do as executor. Then I'm going to explain what made mom's process so stressful for me, and I'm going to talk about how the process might be different for my dad and how I'm going to choose if I'm going to be willing to do that. I think this is really going to shed a lot of light on the situation for you because people just don't talk about this that much. First, I had to find my mom's attorney's name and give him a call. Luckily, he had a copy of my mom's will. I hired the services of that attorney to help me with the whole court processes, but you really could probably do this on your own. All the attorney fees came out of the estate, so I didn't have to pay anything out of my own pocket. The attorney submitted the will to the probate court, and I was officially named the executor. Don't call me executrix. And a legal document called a letter of testamentary, sometimes called a letter of administration, was issued. And this is a document that anytime I did any business on behalf of the estate, I had to show it to every creditor and every professional that was to be involved in this long process to come. Next, I had to get many copies of my mom's death certificate and provide those to all of the creditors, the banks, and every professional. Everybody wanted a copy of those. Next, I opened a new checking account in the name of the estate with me as the legal signer. And then I transferred all of my mom's money from her accounts into that account. And I closed all of her existing bank accounts. I had to find out who all the creditors were, get the account information and the balance information, and contact each of them and let them know that Mom had passed away. Of course, many of them wanted copies of the death certificate and the letters from the court, and so those were also mailed in. This was to show proof that I was then, going forward, the person responsible for those accounts. I notified Social Security that Mom had passed away and also sent a copy of the death certificate. I was responsible to close any accounts that were no longer needed and to continue to make payments on those accounts, such as the mortgage, the property insurance, and utilities until they were no longer needed. I was responsible for taking a full inventory of everything in the home and the property and have everything appraised. Then I made sure that the house was packed up, items donated, or thrown away as was appropriate. And it was also my responsibility to secure the home and make sure everything left in it was safe until it was time to sell or distribute items to the beneficiaries. I had to file Mom's last income taxes. I had to contract with a real estate agent to help sell the home and the property. I had to keep track of every single thing that I did and every single penny that was used out of that estate bank account, because the court wanted to see an accounting of everything. Pretty much every step of the way, the court was required to approve it. Once the home sold and all the creditors were paid off and all the accounts were closed, only then did the court approve to have whatever was left over distributed to the beneficiaries. Okay, I'm tired just going over that list, and I think that this is a pretty typical list of things that you're going to be responsible to do as executor for your family member. So it sounds pretty simple, right? And you might be wondering, well, why was that so stressful? Well, let me tell you a few things that contributed to my stress. My mom lived 350 miles away from me. I was working full-time. I had just had a baby who was 10 months old when my mom passed away. And I had to drive up to her property almost every weekend for a good 2 months to take care of the house, to go through everything, and to find everything that was necessary to go through this process. And I had to take a lot of time off work to meet with the attorney and other professionals. And I'm telling you, this was not a small, neat house, and my mom did not have all her ducks in a row. This was a 7-bedroom house on a 10-acre ranch that she lived in for over 40 years. And there was certainly no nice, neat filing system. I had to go through 40 years of paperwork and dusty old files to figure out what was going on with her financial life and to get all her accounts in order. This information was never shared with me ahead of time, and every step of the way was a shock for me. I found out that the bank was ready to foreclose on her property and it had to go to auction. One family member tried to buy the property and other family members didn't agree with that and didn't want them to do it. So that caused me a lot of stress because I was stuck in the middle. And along the way, sometime, the house got vandalized and the windows were broken. So I had to arrange for someone to go board up the house and secure it while I was 350 miles away. And of course, there were family members who would call and say, "When is the money coming? When is the money coming? When is the money coming?" Ah! I continued to drive up periodically, but after the first few months, I was able to manage most things from my own home. But this process took about 18 months. In the end, I can say I did my duty the very best way I could. I think that I did a good job under the circumstances, and I hope that I made my mom proud. But honestly, in hindsight, if I knew what was to come, I never would have taken on that responsibility and the role of executor. I would have gladly given it to someone else to do. Let me show you something. So I made this table that shows the level of stress and burden over on the left, and across the bottom are 8 factors that for me highly influenced how this experience of being an executor was for me. including distance, time, work, money, complexity, family dynamics, other obligations, and stress tolerance. So I'm going to show you how I rated myself on all of these different factors. For distance, the fact that my mom lived 350 miles away from me definitely caused high stress for me, considering how often I had to make the 6-hour drive there and back. The time involved, they say that it can take 150 to 500 hours of an executor's time to close the estate, depending on the complexity. I'd say it took me at least 200 hours over that 18-month period. For the factor of work, I was working full-time and I had to take off work a lot, and no one covered for me, so this caused a big stress for me at work. Plus, in this work category, I counted the actual physical work of going through all of her 40 years of stuff just to find the things that I needed and to get packed up. It was a lot of work, and that made this score really high for me because I pretty much did it on my own. For the money, most of the expenses are paid out of the estate. Things like your traveler or hotel, things like that, you don't have to pay out of your pocket. However, because I had to take so much time off work, more than I had PTO available, therefore I was missing a lot of wages. For complexity, what made this so complex for me was not knowing anything about my mom's finances going into it and having to sift through 40 years of stuff to get the information that I needed, plus just the size of her house and the ranch that included ranch equipment and things, and the fact that she was behind in her mortgage and we had to go to auction. It made this really stressful for me. For family dynamics, because I was the youngest of 5 kids, sometimes I felt inept to handle the family stress. I felt in the middle of all the family disagreements. Overall, I'd say that my family was pretty tame compared to a lot of other families out there, but it still did cause me an amount of stress. Other obligations, I mentioned that I had a 10-month-old baby, but I also had a 5-year-old daughter and a husband and a home to take care of and my full-time job and my household. And I was pulled away constantly from all of my other obligations, and that was huge for me. Stress tolerance, this is an inverted score. This would be your innate ability to handle stress. The lower the score here, the better you can handle stress. So I generally could handle stress pretty well. So if I average out the stress burden score for being the executor for my mom's estate by adding up all the scores and dividing by the 8 factors across the bottom, I'd get a score of 6.5 for my mom. Now let's look at my dad and how I anticipate taking care of his affairs would be. For distance, my dad lives 20 miles from me, no problem at all. Time-wise, I don't think I would take hardly any time at all, maybe, a day or two to pack up his things. Work-wise, I might have to take a little bit of time off work to handle the banking, but not that much. I counted in here the time to just pack up his personal effects. Money, it wouldn't cost me any money at all to take care of my dad's affairs. Complexity, my dad's life is not complex at all. He has no mortgage, no bills really to pay. I already know everything about his finances and I'm already on all his accounts. So it would be a natural transition for me to take care of his things. Family dynamics, I don't think that this would be an issue at all. I probably could have rated it a 0. My other obligations, yes, I still do have a life and I do work full-time, but my kids are now grown up, and because Dad's estate is so simple, I don't think it would affect any of my other obligations too much. Stress tolerance, again, this is an inverted score. I think that I've matured and developed a lot since handling my mom's affairs, and I can handle stress pretty well these days, so I gave that a low score. So if I had to average out the stress burden score for my dad by adding the scores and dividing by the 8 factors, Dad gets a 1.9. So you can easily see that my dad's situation is so different from my mom's. The level of stress and burden would be really low. So I think I could certainly do the job. So yes, Dad, I will be your executor. I encourage you to go through this exercise and anticipate what your score might be on each of these factors and see where you fall. I think that any score over 5 or 6 or higher just might be a little bit too stressful, and you might want to reconsider whether or not you want to take on that role of executor, because you do have a choice. If I knew that the stress of being executor for my mom would be so high, I wouldn't have done it. I would have gladly given it to someone else. And I wouldn't have had to do it, because just because you're named as executor in the will doesn't mean you're bound to having to do that. Sometimes there's a backup executor listed in the will or a co-executor that you could default to them. You could also hire a bank, CPA, a trust company, or an attorney. You do have options. This video sheds light on some of the things that you need to think about before accepting the role of executor. I don't think that your family member would intentionally cause a huge burden for you, and I don't think they'd mind if it was going to be a huge burden if you gave that role to someone else. Take a look at this video here to find out how you can help your family member get their affairs in order now, because the more that can be taken care of now, the easier your role of executor will be in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos on everything senior related. Thanks so much for watching today. I'll see you next time.